This week on Mysterious Disappearances, we have an accursed mermaid online. And no, it's not Disney's remake of Ariel. No, it is a VTuber gone mad. And I really wish that we could get VTubers to look like this, because this is some fine quality. Only in anime, though. Hi there, everyone. Lars here from Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. And in this week's episode of Mysterious Disappearances, the episode is, well, really straightforward. You have one of Oto's friends getting cheered on by this VTuber. And it's very clear that this little exhibitionist blonde girl is going through quite a bit. It now makes a little bit sense why she's a bit crazy, because there's so much pressure being put on her by her absentee parents, because they're always working as doctors all the time. Apparently, while being fantastic doctors, they have no concept of mental health or of social health, which kind of falls in line with what you see with a lot of doctors who have no concept for lung care or liver care, because they always seem to be smoking or drinking after their shifts. In any case, Oto's friend is under a lot of pressure to do very, very well, and unfortunately she's against Oto, who has this unfair advantage as being one of the protagonist's sisters, and also just being from another time, being from another plane of existence. She's just so brilliant and so cute. Of course you can't stand up to her, and this is kind of eating up this poor little blonde alive. But more than that, it's again just the expectations being thrown on her, because she just wants to be an idol. She wants to sing and dance for her profession. But that is not the path that has been chosen for her, and that's not what she's praised for either. So she turns to this VTuber who praises her, who encourages her. This is one of those fantastic people online who has created a persona in order to encourage other people, connect with other people, and I expect that within the next episode you will finally learn the identity of this person, and it's actually for a very, very sweet reason why this person encourages others. Unfortunately, she's retiring, which means that all of the people who have been heavily relying on this VTuber for their support, their encouragement, for their strength, or just everything, well, suddenly they don't have that, and it throws so many of them into the spiral of depression that their faith, their hopes, their dreams have been shattered. So much faith just seems to be lost, and thus a curiosity is born. A new being has been waiting to come into existence, a thing that once so loved has now been thrown away, can now take on a life of its own out of pure vindictiveness in order to suck out the life of those who once gave it purpose. And thus the sweet avatar of this little mermaid becomes an absolute monstrosity, which encourages people to do their best so much that it is driving them ragged and killing them by making them do what they want to do so much that they no longer sleep, eat, take care of themselves, and they fall apart. And thus we have this new creature that is going to be going around, and this thing is going to become pretty OP. Not just because it is a curiosity like many of the other curses and things that we've yet come across within the story, but because it is a creature with access to the internet. And kind of like with Digimon the first movie, which is the best Digimon movie, therefore it has absolute access to just about anything. It can go anywhere. It can take on any kind of guise or identity that it wishes in order to reach more people, to gain more faith, gain more power, and drive more people to insanity and self-destruction. Or, at least so we think. I am really excited to see what happens in the next episode. But that being said, my excitement aside, no matter how much I love this story, one thing I have to say is that this episode was definitely rushed. The pacing just went way too fast. If we return to the manga, this is one of those horrors that takes its time. It's not as spooky as the girl in the scarlet raincoat, but it's one that builds itself up, really torturing all of the people who have given their love and affection to Yormun, this mermaid, and they are repaid in probably the worst way possible once the curiosity is born. But because we only have a handful of episodes left to finish up everything to the end of the Cat King arc, which we get an introduction to the Cat King at the end of this episode, because we're just barreling on ahead, the pacing is not there for the horror, and the music and the voice acting can't really make up for it. Again, in order for horror to really work, you need to slow things down. You need to ratchet up the tension, the anxiety, the stakes, and that's usually by slowing things down. Good horror stories aren't about the jump scares and getting to the next jump scare. Usually, great horror movies and great horror books draw things out. They get you invested in these characters, they get you invested in the setting, and they slowly sprinkle in the horror elements of the things that just don't seem to be right in the house. The weird, creepy whispers, the goosebumps that you feel, the cold breath on your cheek. Things are written weird on your refrigerator. Things just don't seem to make a whole lot of sense, and these things just keep building up and building up slowly but surely to then becoming something truly horrific. And once the characters realize that something is wrong, it's too late. You've built up that anxiety, and then you just start hitting them. And that is what most good horrors do. Unfortunately, again, because the pacing is so fast, you can't get any of that. Instead, the show has to rely on the previous characterizations that's done for these characters, but because we've been so focused on the stories of Sumireko and Ren, these characters might not be as beloved to you or as well known to you in the anime as they would be to you in the manga, which takes way more time to firmly establish each character that's going to be important later on. So if the pacing to this episode robs it of its horror, and if the characterization isn't really strong, then you might be wondering, Lars, why do you then enjoy this episode? I enjoy it because the core idea is still there. And again, I'm just a sucker for the manga. When I watch this, I'm like, yes, I remember that from the manga. A-okay. But if you think about it, what happens when something that you've loved for so long or so hard just suddenly is abandoned? Even if it's abandoned out of necessity, what happens to you or to that thing? What we see playing out is we see people spiraling into depression, unsure of what they're going to do with themselves. And this is something I think a lot of people can resonate with, can identify with when a show that they've really loved is suddenly canceled, or they get to the end of a book series and they just want it to go on for even longer. Or maybe there is an athlete that you've really enjoyed watching and then they retire sooner than you expected, or they go and transfer to another team that you really hate, and you're just everything that you relied on is just broken. What are you going to do next? People can identify with that anger, that frustration, that depression. But what happens if that thing also feels abandoned? How will it respond? Imagine if the toys from Toy Story suddenly became overpowered and cursed because they are so angry at Andy for abandoning them. This is what's happening with this mermaid avatar. She's taking on a life all her own because she's been abandoned. But she's been loved so much that she gets life. And what's she going to do with that life? We're going to find out. This actually applies to some, I wouldn't say kooky, because that would be disrespectful, but it applies to some of the more obscure spiritual themes that you can find throughout Eastern cultures, where things that have been loved so much have taken on an identity and even a personality all their own, like a legendary sword, or maybe the favorite cooking spoon of your great-great-grandmother, or maybe that chair or that picture that's just been in the family for so long that people have to have it. It's a special heirloom. It's a part of the family. Well, what happens then if the family disrespects that heirloom or disrespects that special sword? Well, because it's been so loved and it's become part of the family, it has gained a certain sense of spiritual significance. It can now enact a kind of revenge. Its feelings are hurt. It might curse you. It might leave. It might break as a result and basically This is karma for you being disrespectful to it. It can't be like a person who can argue with you and say, hey, I'm feeling neglected here. What's up? Let's try to fix this relationship. Because it's an object, it can't do that. It now has to do something else instead. And this is a fun way to play with that belief and take it into, at least in the manga, in a horrific direction. We're going to see what happens in the next episode as they go up against this mermaid. And if it's anything like within the manga, even with the fast pacing, we're in for a very interesting fight. And you're also in, I think, for a very good emotional reveal, because this avatar has truly significant meaning, not just to her victims, but to other people as well. And that's something to look forward to. And if there's one more bit of writing advice that I would put into my review here and my analysis of this episode, it would be this. Rather, not just the pacing that you want for your story. And again, pacing is really difficult to pull off. It depends from story to story and what you want to do. But that aside, you can do incredible things with obscure and sometimes even good religious notions and ideas and theories that most people just kind of set off to the side. Some of the best ideas within a story are things that people just kind of passed on by, such as, again, what happens to the thing that you abandon? What if it has feelings? Other great story ideas, thinking of Toy Story, is what is the life that bugs have? Imagine if you could visit a colony of ants and they're doing their thing. What would that be like? What is the outcast ant's life like? That's an interesting question right there, because ants are supposed to work in a colony, and if they don't work together, they all die. What happens to the outcast ants? Asking these kinds of questions of things that people just wouldn't really take notice of. Or another one, coming back to religion, everyone always talks about how it's good to forgive because you're supposed to forgive the person who has harmed you because that is going to help them move on. But how many stories actually honestly deal with what forgiveness does to the person who's been wronged? Most stories actually don't. If you honestly spend time with stories that are all about forgiveness, it's always about the person receiving it rather than the person giving it. But there is a very powerful spiritual idea in that. And imagine if you decide to sit down and write a story revolving around that notion. These are just some examples of things that people just pass on by, things that people don't normally think about. And there is great power and potential in those kinds of stories, in those kinds of premises, which is why this particular story of the VTuber avatar suddenly coming to life thanks to all of the love and attention, admiration that people have given it, and yet it's now been ripped away from it, and so it takes a life all its own. This is a kind of story that gets you thinking, well, what have I not been really paying attention to recently? What is something that I've loved that I don't really love so much anymore? And why don't I? What happened to it? What's happened to me? Those are the kinds of things that you want to have your audience thinking about. That's when a story really becomes powerful, when it leaves the audience with questions. Not with questions about how the heck did this happen in the plot, that's bad writing, but rather questions that get them to reflect on their own life. And so that's why, despite the pacing problems in this episode, I really do feel like this is still a very powerful installment within Mysterious Disappearances. So let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. And if you're looking for more writing, reviews, analyses, the likes, please check out our other videos here on our channel. And if you'd really like to support the work that we do, if you haven't subscribed already, please do that, or check out the books that we've published. Links for them are in the description below. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us on this incredible adventure that we call writing. And until the next video, y'all, tschüss.